And so it was from that day until now. Whenever you hear a really good story, you can be sure that there's at least a little bit of truth hidden there somewhere. So I left corporate. Lots of people said to me, you should do that coaching thing. And I said, what is that coaching thing? Although I'd been coaching for years within the corporate scenario, I didn't really understand what it was to call yourself a coach and start a practice. And I decided, which tends to be the way I do things, well, I better go study it then. So I signed up for a program and I went through the whole process. And as it happens, at the same time, I started studying with a wonderful storyteller in Israel. And simultaneously, I was going along these two paths, and I kept watching how they were crossing over, and they were weaving in and out of each other. And I started thinking, there must be something in this. What is this? And finally, after some months of studying and learning and telling and coaching, I realized that there had to be this thing called story coaching. And story coaching, in the most simplest way I can describe it, is based on the idea that we are all storytellers. We tell the stories of our life all the time. If you think about it, how you ended up in this room, how you got to the conference, how you became a coach, how you met your partner, where you had dinner last night, how you're going to be traveling home, they're all stories that you're going to tell or have told. And they are completely subjective. You choose the characters, you choose the narrative, you choose everything about these stories, and yet these are the stories that define your life. So our stories define our reality, and as I mentioned before, we get stuck in them sometimes. What I started noticing is as people get stuck in their stories, there are other people who tell the most wonderful stories and the most empowering stories. And think about siblings. You know, when I hear my sister talking about our childhood, I sometimes say to her, did we grow up in the same house? Like, is this possible? Because we tell an entirely different story of certain events in our childhood. And there's lots of reasons for that, but at the end of the day, I believe it's a choice. Sometimes it's subconscious, but it is a choice. And when we start examining our stories, really inquiring, what are these stories doing for us? How are they serving us? We can start changing them, and we can start writing or creating or telling more empowering ones. Now don't get me wrong, this is not about rewriting the past. This is not about saying this didn't happen, something else happened entirely. This is about learning from our past stories and creating stories from a more powerful perspective. And that's a big difference. And I realized that I've completely forgotten about PowerPoint. I used to call it PowerPointless, and then I decided I ought to use this. So I do apologize. Okay. Now I see what I've forgotten. No. Okay. It's true what they say that stories tell. Stories sell. Think about, I really don't want to get into this, but think about, the McDonald's telling the story of them being a salad bar, And that's a great story that sells. I don't quite buy it, but stories do sell. But what I'm talking about in story coaching is something entirely different. I'm talking about finding the stories that help us reach our true potential. I'm talking about using stories in our life and in our practice and for our clients that create transformation. So it's not about manipulation. It's not about creating some kind of, people misuse this word, the story, they tell a great story, and it implies it's a lie. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about using stories to engage people and to inspire people. And, very often, something pretty magical happens when you tell a story. And what I'd like you to do is to take a moment right now to think about who your first storyteller was. It might have been a parent, mother, father, grandparent. It might have been a priest or a teacher. But just think for a moment who that first storyteller was. And once you have that person in your mind, what I'd like you to do is just think about where the storytelling happened. Was it in a classroom? Was it in the church? Was it in the bedroom before sleeping? Was it over the dinner table? And what I'd like to do is turn around to the person next to you and just exchange that very simply and quickly, just who your storyteller was, your first storyteller, and where it happened. Okay? Just give you a moment to do that.